I'm seeing all of the folks still logging in and chatting where they're joining us from. Really exciting to have everyone here. So I'm going to officially get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm L'Oreal McGuire. I'm the Executive Director of Student Services and Alumni Engagement here in the School of Professional Studies. We're glad that you could join us for our fourth session of SPSConnect. This is our last session of 2025, and today's topic of discussion is Impact by Design, Building a Career of Meaning. And what a perfect time of year to be having this conversation. It's my pleasure today to introduce our distinguished speakers. We have Shannon Binns, founder and executive director of Sustain Charlotte, and one of last year's top 100 innovators, as named by the Charlotte Business Journal. Let's see, Shannon is also a member of our Public Administration Program Advisory Board. Also joining us today is Imana Sherrill, head of School of Trinity Episcopal School in Charlotte. That's a mouthful, Imana. Beyond her leadership role at Trinity Episcopal, Imana serves on multiple boards in Charlotte, including UNC Charlotte's Black Alumni Board and our very own Educational Leadership Program Advisory Board. Thank you, Imana and Shannon, for all you do for SPS and for joining us this afternoon. And then, of course, moderating our conversation today is Tiffany Tate, founder and CEO of Career Maven Consulting. Career Maven, as many of you know, is a strategic partner of SPS, providing one-on-one career coaching to our students. Tiffany is a double Deke, although she's more known for her expertise in career development and leadership, as well as being a female entrepreneur and in-demand keynote speaker. Before we dive in today, please note that this session is being recorded, and we'll also encourage you to use the chat function, as many of you already are. We'll have dedicated Q&A segment later in the program, and now I'm going to kick it off to Tiffany.
Thanks, L'Oreal. Imana, Shannon, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. And I'll just jump in. Before we get into our questions, I welcome each of you. I'll start with Imana, if you could share a little bit about what your role is for everyone on the call.
Would love to. Thank you. First, thank you for having me. This is such an important conversation and very timely. My role is head of school at Trinity Episcopal School in Uptown Charlotte. We're a K-8 school. But I think for this conversation, it's more important to talk about the purpose and why this is a position that matters to me. I was an educator my whole life. I started in public schools, worked my way through public schools into independent schools. And when I tell you I've taught everything in lower, middle, and upper school, so it truly is something that I have always loved to do. It is my passion and it is my purpose. But sitting in this seat allows me to lift others up. It allows me to help educators really thrive and do what they do best. It also helps me to see who's not at the table. Advocacy is very important to me. Making sure that someone is represented at the table is really important to me. So I have spent a lot of time nurturing young leaders and getting them into positions that mean something to them. It has to be beyond a title. It has to be beyond even a salary. Is it something that you wake up doing and you enjoy doing? Every single day I roll on campus to Trinity, I am excited when I walk in the door. And I cannot say that that has always been how I have felt, but when you are living your purpose and doing something that matters to you, it's joyful. It is just joyful. What is that saying? If you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That is where I am. So
excellent. Thank you, Imana. Shannon, I'll hand it over to you. Oh, did we lose Shannon?
Hey, sorry guys, I was on mute, wasn't I? Apologies. How y'all doing today? I guess you can't, you're on mute, so you can't answer my question, but I can tell by the smiles you guys are doing well. Tiffany, am I just giving a quick overview of kind of who I am, what I do?
Yeah, who you are, what you do, and what meaningful work means to you.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm down here in Charlotte, and I lead a nonprofit, small nonprofit called Sustain Charlotte that I started shortly after I moved to Charlotte. I moved here in 2007. I started Sustain in 2010. So I was just kind of doing the math today. I know it's an easy number to calculate, but we're 15 years in, and I definitely did not think I would be doing Sustain Charlotte for 15 years. Back when I started this as kind of a side gig outside of my normal job, but here I am, and enjoyed it just as much as the day I started it. There's been ups and downs. There's definitely been times when I haven't enjoyed it, but kind of feel like, because the work is meaningful, to bring it back to this topic today, it's I definitely feel like I'm living my purpose, and being able to apply my skills, my strengths, my gifts, I guess is the best term, through my work, and that's really important. I'm going to try to avoid rambling too much. I'll just say that we can get into this later probably, but finding what I do, finding the work that I love was a journey, and I often refer to it as a crooked path. It took me a while to figure that out, and all the experiences I gained in the process were very valuable. And I know I used those experiences, in the perspective they gave me today. But I didn't actually decide what field was the right field for me until let me just say this. I got my MPA when I was 29, and that's kind of when my career began. So I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Shannon. So you've both sort of hovered around this next question a little bit in your introductions, but I would really love for us to spend some time defining what you mean, or what meaningful work means to each of you, and how that's evolved when you think about the beginning of your career to now. Recognizing that you both have many more years in your work, but you sort of both mentioned that, okay, well, how I feel about my work today is not the same as how I felt about it back when or when I started. I really appreciate the imagery of a cricket path, Shannon. That resonates with me quite a bit, despite the work that I do. And I think people are always trying to figure out that intersection between skills and what you do, and how what you do can either manifest into impact or meaning, and reconciling those two things, because we spend more time at work than we do anywhere else, right? And so I'd love for you to share what meaningful work means to each of you, and how that's kind of shifted over the course of your career.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to jump in. I think early in my career, it was about getting the job, right? Like you graduate from school, you want to be off your parents' payroll. So it was about what do I feel good about? What do I think I can do? And I always knew that I was going to work with kids. But at my early stage, I thought it was going to be as a pediatrician. But seeing sick children did not resonate with me. So I needed to think of something else. It was a little bit of a crooked path as well. But early career, it was just about, I'm competent, I can do this job, I think I can help kids. But then as I really dug into education and what it means, it became more to me about equity, about representation, about making sure that the mission of the school and the mission of the work that I was doing aligned with who I am as a person. And so it just became a passion for me. Like I knew that I was doing work that could affect generations. It could affect the city that these kids were in. It could affect globally where they were traveling to and where they would eventually live. And I took that so deeply personal. And now in this role for me, it's not just about doing my job well. It's about changing the conditions, so that the people who come after me, I'm setting up systems so that when I leave, that the work can still be done. And so for me, it just matters so deeply that I get to make an impact that will last decades, I hope. And it's not about just a title anymore. It's not about having a certain salary. It really is about impact. And that just wasn't how it was for me in my early career.
Mhm.
Shannon, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, that all resonates so much. I feel like I could say the same thing. That's how much I feel the same way as you, Amana. For me, I actually did my undergraduate degree is in industrial engineering, and as my dad used to say, I retired when I was 23 from engineering. It was not a fit for me, and I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went into college. There was very little advice I would say I was given or exposure to career paths. I made a decision with very little thought about what I wanted to do and what it meant to actually be an engineer. So, yeah, when I was 23, I quit my corporate America job. I was working at Motorola as an engineer, and decided to move overseas and teach English as a second language in the capital of the Czech Republic, Prague. And I had been there before, just traveling, and really wanted to go back and do something completely different than math and science, and really rediscovered my love of language and people, and sort of the opposite of engineering work. But I didn't exactly know still what I wanted to do. That was more of I want to live overseas, and teaching English is a easy way to do that. But then a 9/11 happened while I was there, and that brought me back to the U.S. to serve. I felt like I wanted to serve our country in some way, and so I did what's you guys probably know about this program. It's often considered the domestic Peace Corps, called AmeriCorps. And so I did a year of service in the National Civilian Community Corps. And it was in that program that I was exposed to social and environmental issues that I was completely oblivious to growing up in a small town, a very homogenous small town in Iowa. So just to see the challenges that, a lot of people faced in our country that I didn't face, and no one I knew really faced. And then really learning about environmental crises led me to realize, wow, there's a lot more meaningful work out there that I could be doing. And that's when I discovered I wanted to do environmental work, just learning about the environmental crisis that we face. Oh, I meant to mention one other thing that I think was very important. When I was at Motorola, part of what led me to decide to retire exactly 12 months into my job, so I didn't have to repay any of my hiring bonus. I read a book that year called How to Find the Work You Love by I just ordered this book for my nieces and nephew for Christmas. But I haven't had my afternoon coffee yet, so I'm blanking the author's name, but it's a very good book. Highly recommended if you are trying to find the work you love. Lawrence Bolt is his name. I read that book when I was at Motorola doing this engineering job that I had precisely zero passion or interest in doing. And he sort of, he says in that book essentially that, we are meant to do work we love. And he talks about, the root of the word, vocation, and just, a vocation is something we do because it harnesses our skills, and we can really express ourselves and what our strengths are through our vocation, as opposed to what I was taught. I think a lot of us are taught growing up in this country, which is a good job equals lots of money. And I remember even when I quit Motorola, my dad, who's pretty traditional, pretty conservative, was like, why would you quit that job? It's a good job. And I was like, what makes it good? And he said, it pays well. And I remember just thinking that doesn't equate to a good job for me. And so that began my journey of looking for work that I loved, not just a job that paid well. And so, fast forward again to 29 years old. realizing I knew I wanted to work in really bringing awareness to our environmental crises and solutions to our environmental crises. But I had to go back to school because I was living in Seattle, and everybody in Seattle wanted to work in that space. And they had college degrees in that. So that's what led me to the MPA program that I did at Columbia, in order to really professionally do the work that I knew I wanted to do, very passionate about doing. But it did take me most of my 20s to figure out exactly what that was.
Thank you, Shannon. So you've also kind of introduced some things that I think are important for my next question. One is, how do people identify or decide when you're making career decisions? And two, Shannon, you mentioned sort of the moment you had, or the moments you had at Motorola where you had to decide, okay, at this mark, I'm out, so I can go and focus on something else. You've shared a little bit about the values that you had a conversation with your dad about that drove your decision to pivot completely. Imana, I'm curious, you mentioned that you wanted to help people and you wanted to work with children. Maybe pediatrics wasn't the path. I'm with you on that. My best friend is a pediatrician. That was not my calling. But for helping people is a high value that I hear a lot of people share when they're talking about making career decisions. I'm curious about what other values are important when you're making decisions about work, whether that's a role or a project or a partnership. What are some of those things that you both use to filter?
Yeah, so I think for me, the values that I grew up with, the values that I was raised on, that isn't always where it shows up in a career. For me, and I wonder how many folks on this call, for me, the values show up in conflict, because that is where you have to make some decisions. That is where the truth really comes out. So when you're in those hard moments, that's when I had to decide, is this the school I wanted to be in? Is this the path I wanted to be in? Because that, for me, you don't really know your values until you're saying to yourself, yes, this job, yes, I can do this, and yes, this aligns with me, or no, I don't think this is going to be the right path. Because if I have to say yes to a job or to an ask of me and say no to myself and my values, that's a conflict for me. If you're asking me to do something, if you're asking me to do a project, or ask me to say some words in front of people that I don't agree with, for me, I need that courageous clarity. I need to be able to say, no, this is something that's not going to work for me. I need to hold on to my dignity in a position, because I'm not going to do a job or to do a thing that just doesn't set right with me and my values. Stewardship is important to me. People and mission are important to me. And so these are the moments that I think your values really speak louder. It's easy when it all lines up really nice and pretty and you can put a bow on it. But it's in that moment of conflict, when you can still hold true to your values and still hold true to who you are and still love your job, then you're in the right place.
Thank you. Shannon, you talked a little bit about heading back into school to pursue a degree so you could be competitive in the space that you wanted to work. Are there other decisions that you both have made to design meaningful work, right? Like, I think it is one thing to want to do incredible work or make an impact in your community. And we can do that in a number of ways, not just through our 9 to 5. We can do that in community, volunteerism, philanthropy. There are, other pathways that we could certainly talk about. But when you're thinking about your career journey, what are some of the trade-offs you've had to make or choices that you've made so that you can sort of plant where you are and grow across the arc of your career? Oh, Shannon, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll jump in here if that's okay, Imana. I feel like there was a lot of decisions that I made and continue to make. But going back in time here, digging deep back into my 20s again, as I did before. I mean, again, the first big decision was, of course, doing something that I think is very difficult for a lot of people. And it wasn't easy for me. Well, it was kind of easy at the time, but looking back, I know a lot of people struggle with making that leap of faith, right? That, wow, if I step off this career path I'm on or leave this high paying job, it's a risk, right? And so, I think that was the first decision to realize, even though I spent 4 years getting this degree and I've got this great job and I've, all these things, right, that we're told is success, right? You got the college degree, you got the corporate job, making good money, you're only, your 20s. But for me, it was very clear, like, that's not enough. And so taking that leap of faith to say, well, if I quit this and step off of this traditional path, the bridge will form that I can't see right now. And I'll end up on the other side of this chasm in front of me. And there will be something better that's better aligned with, how I want to live my life and my purpose. So, of course, it was easy for me to do that. And a lot of people don't have that luxury looking back because, I wasn't living in poverty, right? That's a big deal, right? I had privileges as a white male from a middle-class family where I could just quit, my job and move overseas and basically make no money. So it was a privilege that I'm very grateful I had. But I know that's not an easy decision for a lot of people. So that was kind of the first big decision. And then, from there, like I said, it was a lot of kind of just having let me say this. I was proud of the fact, which again, this probably reflects my privilege now that I reflect on this. I got the earned income tax credit for like my entire 20s, which if you don't know what that is, if you make so little money, the government actually gives you a tax credit because your income is so low. And that was my whole 20s. And I kind of prided myself on how little money I made because I felt like, hey, look at me. I'm not prioritizing money. I'm volunteering basically and getting stipends, AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, these different programs, government programs where they pay you and they give you a stipend and enough to live on, but that's it. There's no money left at the end of the, paying the groceries and paying the rent. But I was proud of that. And so I think that was a decision. It was like, hey, all my peers that went and got their college degrees are making, a lot of money right now and they're putting it away and they're building their retirement. And I had to make the decision to sacrifice that financial security for just trying to figure out what does meaningful look like. What does meaningful work look like for me? And I really, again, spent the rest of my 20s figuring that out because I didn't want to settle and I didn't want to end up in another miserable job like I took out of college and just being in the wrong field. So, it took a financial sacrifice and lots of fits and starts. I tried this, I tried that. There's several other jobs in there I won't mention, including working at a camera shop. I mean, I had a college degree, but I was doing all kinds of things. It didn't pay any money until I kind of figured it out. And again, I want to emphasize that was a privilege that I had. Not that I was wealthy. I definitely lived hand to mouth. But there's still a certain level of comfort to be able to even do that. But finally, really the turning point for me was another book. A book given to me when I was in AmeriCorps by another guy just kind of passing through the project site where I was working, and he gave me this book, and it was called Earth and Mind by a professor at Oberlin College. Well, he was a professor. He probably retired by now. This was a long time ago, named David Orr. And I read this book, and it was like a light bulb went off for me. He wrote so articulately and clearly about the environmental crises of our time, and that, as an academic, he very much saw the problem as a problem of education, and that we were not teaching people, young people, when they're in school, high school or college, what it means to live on this earth responsibly and even to have a connection to the earth. He made this, I think the opening sentence of that book is, you can almost hear the ground or the earth groan every May when another new crop of college graduates hit the ground, diplomas in hand, with absolutely no idea how the jobs they are taking will impact the earth. And that just really stuck with me, and I found it to be so true that I knew I need to help educate people about how dependent we are on the earth and how the choices we're making are really, destroying the very thing that allows us to survive on this planet.
Can I, Tiffany, just jump in and give a really simple, practical thing that I did in college, and I should have done it more, but all of those free personality tests, the Myers-Briggs, the Strength Finders, Enneagrams, do those. Like those were really interesting for me, and they have all the free versions. And I am the same as I was when I took it before. It is just interesting to see. And then it tells you, like, based on these traits, here are some careers that you should think about. And for me, teacher came up in every single one. Creativity, extroverted. So just at a real practical level, just take all of them for free and just see what comes up if you haven't done that yet.
I love that. I do think that leadership assessments or style assessments are helpful to give you sort of language for what's out there. You both talked a little bit about gifts, skills, and how you marry that in your work alongside your values. I don't think there's sort of a one-hit wonder when it comes to career. You really are sort of integrating what you care about, what matters to you. Shannon, you've talked a lot about how you read things or had conversations early on in your career that kind of rocked your core of what it means to build a life and make meaning. And there are trade-offs, right? That depending on your proximity to privilege, you can make or delay some big choices. So I appreciate that as well. I'm curious, when you all are sort of, I want to also elevate us into, you're both leading organizations, right? You're executive leaders. The road to the seats where you occupy have been, it sounds like mostly fun, but also very sort of a journey of self-discovery. I also want to talk a little bit about, in the roles that you occupy, how you measure the impact of your work or your team's work. What are some of the sort of KPIs or variables that you use to determine, hey, we are headed in the right direction? Because you also have to inspire and bring other people along with you. And I know some of the folks on the call may be managing teams. They may aspire to manage teams. They may be sort of flat, bringing peers along in the work that they're doing. And I do want to kind of spend some time hearing from you both about how you measure impact, how you define it, and maybe how you empower other people within your organization to facilitate it, even on the days where it gets hard. Imana, I'll start with you.
Sure. So when I'm thinking about impact and measurement, I track dashboards, yes, because for us, enrollment, retention, campaigns, test scores, all of that matter. But I also want to make sure that students who are invisible feel seen. A teacher who considers leaving decides to stay. So sometimes the spreadsheet version of a dashboard and KPIs and all the things that matter, those are the statistics, but the human side matter as well. If the people that are working for you and working with you feel like their voice is heard, feel like they are being evaluated fairly, feel like they can have an opinion and share it without threat of retribution if it doesn't align with you. Those are things that can be measured but might not show up on a metric, but they matter when it comes to community. It matters when it comes to how people feel when you are leading, and do they feel like you are a leader that listens, and that you are a leader that, yes, money matters, all of that matters, but the personal side has to matter as well. Because if you have disgruntled and upset people working for you, you can't move an organization and you can't be successful because you're fighting against yourself when you don't allow people to feel like they are valued in your organization.
Absolutely. Thank you, Imana.
Mhm.
Do you have anything to add? Like, what are some of the measurements or indicators that your organization is making an impact?
Yeah. So first of all, I agree with everything Amana said. I'll just briefly say the hardest part of my job by far is managing my team. It does not come natural for me. It's been a lot of there's been a lot of challenges for me to manage a team, because I think as the founder, I'm very invested in the organization. I've poured a lot of my time and blood, sweat, and tears, as they say, into the organization. So I have high expectations for my team, especially because all the money that I pay them is donated. So I have a very strong commitment to being a good steward of those donated dollars. So, I really expect my team to do quality work and be efficient and, do the right things that actually have an impact. And there's sometimes honestly a conflict there because, having a high standard sometimes can feel hard, can feel, like too high of a bar. So that's been something I've been challenged with. But I will say, in terms of impact measures, it's something we definitely do. I remember when I was in MPA school, the head of the program in one of our courses, I think it was a management course, said, "What gets measured gets done." And that really struck me, and I found it to be true in my time, my career. So we do set smart goals, metrics with that could be measured. I always tell my team when we set our goals at the beginning of the year and the strategies that we'll use to achieve those goals, that we need to be able to answer the question in December: did we do the thing? Did we do this thing? Was it achieved or not? And that definitely changes. That keeps us honest, if you will. It makes sure we're setting a goal that truly is measurable and an objective. But as Imana said, it's not always that easy. There's some things are just harder to measure with a number. So we do have certain goals that are basically yes or no. And then I also evaluate my team on what I call core competencies. So yes, there are measurable goals. If you're a fundraiser, how much you should raise and how many people you should meet with and so on. But everybody has the same set of core competencies, which are more about reliability, on a kind of measuring on a 1 to 5 scale, how reliable and, sort of your ability to work well with others, all of those kinds of things that we measure as well. And then do quarterly check-ins against those metrics to make sure, we're not just talking about, what are we trying to achieve at the beginning of the year and then at the end, but along the way, making sure we're checking our work against what we said we wanted to do and making adjustments as necessary, right? Because the world does change. And that's another thing I found, especially in my work as an advocacy organization. Every year we try to put together a plan and metrics. Is this what we're going to do this year? And then there are about half of our time at least is spent doing things that we didn't know would pop up and be possible, opportunities that would pop up during the year. So it takes a lot of adjustment, a lot of understanding, and a lot of flexibility that, again, didn't come natural for me. So yeah, managing other people is a whole nother skill set that I'm still learning. I'm still learning that skill set.
It's the hardest part of the job.
I know a good coach, a few actually. I know a few, so we can talk about that after the session. But thank you both for sharing. I think, it's really important to name that our sort of aspirational goals or our legacy goals. Imana, you kind of spoke to how when you were making the decision to go into ed leadership, that sort of preparing people, like actual humans for generations to come, was a big driving force behind that choice in your career. And I think leading people to do good work is similar, right? They're not children, they're not people. But you really do have to cascade a vision for the organization that you're stewarding, or that you're both stewarding, and you're also equipping people to continue the work after you choose to head to the next stop or the next project or the next adventure. I'm curious for both of you how you balance navigating burnout, maybe stress when doing impact work. I think that's a question I would ask people anytime, but I think in 2025, it's a big question when, you know, Shannon, you mentioned we have plans for the year and then things happen that we didn't plan for these things to happen, and we have to sort of pivot our focus or pivot our energy and our time. Imana, I can imagine that, you know, leading a school in 2025 as a parent, I can only imagine what it is like to manage a school. So I'm curious how you both sustain yourselves and balance the work and the impact that you want to make and you want your organization to make, while also taking care of yourselves.
So as I'm sitting in the airport, I love the reminder that you have to put your own mask on first before you put it on someone else. And that is a good metaphor for this work. You can't drive with an empty tank. And so you absolutely have to take care of yourself. And I had a mentor / sponsor that reminded me early to set boundaries and to make sure that my teachers set boundaries. So I am clear with them. You don't have to, everybody's emergency is not yours. And so that 9 o'clock email that comes on a Friday night, unless something's on fire, don't wait. You don't have to respond. Every email is not an emergency. And being able to set that tone clear gives teachers the opportunity to say, I don't have to respond. This is my family time. And I think you have to be really clear about that. And then the whole thing of, well, I need to be the first one there and I need to be the last one to leave, you will get burned out automatically. It is not about how much time you spend sitting at your desk or sitting at your place of employment. It's about the work that you do. And if you are efficient and you know how to manage your time and your calendar, you can get that done without burning yourself out. And I think that is something that you have to learn early. It's just boundaries. When you start feeling like your body is tired, listen, that means you need a break, and it's okay to take a break. You can't build a career of meaning if you're constantly on the edge thinking about quitting because you're tired. So you have to reframe your mind. And there's a book that I meant to share in the last one that we read as a school, and it's called Radical Candor. It's about caring personally but challenging directly, how to have those really tough conversations with the people that report to you. It's a phenomenal book.
I love that book. Kim Scott is my personal queen. She has
She
another book
is.
called SPSConnect as well that I would recommend.
Yes.
I'll keep
Yes.
putting both of your book recommendations in the chat. Shannon, how do you balance taking care of yourself while leading an organization? What are some things that you do?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm probably not a very good example. I have work to do on this front too. I'm very consumed by the work, and it's because I love it so much. It's hard for me to step away, and there's just always a lot to do. You know, in the small nonprofit space, there's always more work than there is time because we're under resourced and we have big missions. Right? We're passionate people trying to achieve big social changes, and it's certainly for me, I think it's true for a lot of founders, we have really big visions, and I drastically underestimate what it takes to execute my ideas. That's why I have an operations director to check me and be like, Shannon, there's no way we can do that. But sometimes I still ignore her, and I try to do things, and then we're all burned out. So, but I will say I'm getting better, now as my age rounds up to 50, I'm finally realizing, it's important to have boundaries. So I would say actually this year, more than any other year, I've really undertaken some new practices that I'll share. So one is, for most of these last 15 years, I really allowed my email inbox to dictate my time far too much. there was always email, and I always had this nagging feeling like I need to respond to it. And I've kind of recently let go of that. And I don't just constantly check my inbox. In fact, I rarely check my inbox, and it gets me in trouble sometimes. I miss some very important emails. So it's not an ideal situation, but it's allowed me to be less stressed and be able to focus on the more important work that I was not doing before. The bigger picture strategy and writing, and just things that really are going to be impactful for my organization and for my team, that responding to the constant flow of emails coming in was not allowing me to do. So that's one thing that's, and not just the time, but just the mental stress of, I gotta keep up with my inbox. That was causing me a lot of burnout, I think. There was another big one. Give me 1 second here, guys, to come back to that. The other big one, and this is going to probably sound a little crazy, especially to Amana, who I know is way more put together on this front than I am. Again, I'm not very good at sort of putting together like, hey, here's what we would always have goals for the year, but I didn't necessarily estimate how much time it would take to achieve those goals, right? And then take that to the next step. Okay, if we do all these things, not only will it take this many hours of our time, but then what does that cost on a per campaign or per project basis? We had a budget, of course, but the budget wasn't necessarily aligned with the scope of work. It was like, we're going to do as much stuff as we can, and we're going to raise as much money as we can. We're going to raise at least this much to pay the people we have. But I really wasn't, taking a very scientific approach to how much can we actually get done with limited hours, right? So this year we are, we're taking an approach where we're listing all the things we want to do, we'll call it the project wish list. And then I'm asking my team to help me come up with an estimate. How many hours will it take to do that thing? And then what does that, and then I'll do the work of translating it into money, so we can have a cost estimate if we undertake that idea, which again sounds probably very basic. But in my world, that just wasn't really happening. And I think that was causing burnout for me and my team, because I would see something, I'd see an opportunity. We've got to do this, guys. We've got to do this because, look, I mean, this has to be addressed, right? I don't want to say I was chasing the shiny object, but maybe I kind of was. I was definitely chasing the opportunity for impact, and that causes burnout. So trying to be more realistic about what time and resources do I and my team have, and then being more thoughtful about the things we take on, even though I'd like to take them all on.
Shannon, you made me think about when you were talking about email, the thing that has saved my life, and I will recommend it. It does cost, but it's worth it, is Superhuman. It is my new favorite email tool that just gives me all the priority email, and it filters out all the junk.
Superhuman, huh?
Superhuman. Check it out.
These are great resources. I want to, before we transition to audience Q&A, I do want to elevate a few of the themes I heard throughout the conversation. So folks who are watching this video later, maybe they fast forwarded or they're skipping around. I want to make sure that people sit and maybe spend some personal time reflecting on some of what you both have shared. We've talked a little bit about meaning and how you define it at different stages of your career. Maybe early on, we are focused on competency, getting the job, landing well, so the people in our lives or the imaginary people that we think are watching us, that we've done, we're doing something well, but how that can transition either quickly in your 20s or later on, depending on what happens in your personal and professional life, to be more focused on mission alignment and making an impact. And you can do that in a number of ways. We've talked a little bit about generational legacy. So seeding bits through your work and through the people that you work with and in the community, so that for years to come, there is fruit on the other side of what you're seeding. People challenges and community impacts sometimes don't look like the personal experience that we have lived, but seeing other parts of the world, reading new books, can change our worldview and change our perspective so much that we can make different choices in our careers as a result. You've both shared a little bit about values and how your values aren't, you maybe don't know what they are, how strong they are until conflict arises and you're tested and have to make difficult choices. And we've talked a little bit about how you both measure impact in your individual practice, in the practice of your organization, and how stewarding both the organization and its people is just as important as what services or products or impact the organization or company is making out in the world, because that sort of people work is just as important as what the value prop is for the organization beyond the people in the four walls. And you've shared some books that I've dropped in the chat for folks who may want to check those out later. I do have one last question for you before we open it up for Q&A, before we wrap our time. What is one myth about finding your purpose or having meaning in your career that you wish more working professionals understood? Just one thing, one myth. While you're thinking about it, I do want to also remind SPS students and alums that are on the call that you actually do have to check your email, and that you only get the gift of signing out of email once you are in the top seat of an organization and someone else can check it for you. But you all probably should check your email and make sure that you're signing up for SPSConnect in Q1 2026. All right, I've stalled for you both. Do you have a myth that you'd like to share for the audience?
Tiffany, listen, I'm so tired right now. I need the question again. I got one of my bad habits is I get up at 3 a.m. to start working. Don't do that. But by this time of day, I'm usually a little, ready for a nap. So please do that question one more time.
That is so intense, Shannon.
I know, ridiculous.
What is one myth about finding your purpose or having meaning in your career that you wish more professionals understood?
All right. So I think the myth is that once you find your purpose, everything feels so aligned and magical and it's going to be beautiful and you never have conflict. That is not true. I think the reality is that sometimes purpose is peaceful and lovely, and sometimes it's expensive and inconvenient. The fact is that it's hard, and it doesn't matter if you're on track, you'll figure it out. But once you find your purpose, I love what I do. I think I'm at the best school in all of Charlotte. Our kids are loved, but there are conflicts, and there are some times where it's just not fun. And usually it's the management of people. That is the hardest part of the job.
Yeah.
Shannon, you need more time?
No, sorry. I was waiting to make sure you were finished. People is definitely the hardest part. I mean, just one big one is that you can't make money if you pursue your purpose, right? I mean, I think that's, at least when I was growing up, hopefully this is changing, but you either made good money or you did purposeful work. And I think that myth is fueled by the fact that people in nonprofits do make less on average than people in the for-profit sector, for sure. But that doesn't mean you can't make money. You may not get wealthy, but you can live a good life, right? And I think the problem we have, and one of the problems we have in this country, with our form of capitalism is that enough isn't it? It's never enough, right? It's I think what we're taught is there's no limit, right? That no matter what you're making, there's always more you could make, and therefore you should pursue. So I think that's a myth, is that you if you go pursue your purpose, well then you should just plan on being poor. That is not true. Certainly you're not going to be able to probably buy a yacht at 25 or 35 if you pursue your passion, but that may or may not be true, right? Like, certainly there's a lot of people who I think have pursued meaningful work that went on to become wealthy, but I just think that's a big one, right? I mean, I think you can make a good living and live your purpose. And then of course, beyond the money, you'll be a lot happier, right? Since we all know money doesn't buy happiness. Purpose buys happiness. I just coined that. You know, I don't know if it makes any
Trademark
sense.
it.
I'm pretty tired, but you know, purpose. There's definitely a lot more happiness to be found in a career of purpose than a career of making lots of money, in my experience.
Can I also name something since you brought this up earlier, Shannon, when you talked about your privilege? I do want to name, as a Black woman, I do want to name that sometimes you do have to present yourself a little bit different. You do have to work a tad bit harder because, as we are right now, there is always that doubt. There's a little bit of proving yourself, and I'm well over 50, and I still experience that when I walk into some rooms and I'm the only, and there's no other woman, there's no other person of color. So I think we need to name that there is a added burden that you still have to overcome. But because all of you are on this Zoom and in this call, just name that and know that you have to sometimes present a little bit higher.
That's so good. Thank you for amplifying that, Imana. I also want to add an additional point. I don't think I said it out loud earlier, but I drove past it quite quickly because of the purpose of our conversation today. But I also want to name that you're really not choosing between doing meaningful work and being equipped to do the job, right? Like they have to go together. And you both mentioned different aspects of that. Shannon, you mentioned, as an individual person out doing work, I didn't think about or realize we actually do need to scope out our plans and figure out how to garner the resources and allocate the resources of money and time and people. Those are aspects of business acumen that do matter as you continue to ascend in your career. The people management stuff is the hardest because people sometimes don't spend a ton of time or don't have the opportunity to spend time to upskill around leading people. And it's continuous learning. This never changes. You don't get into the C-suite and then magically you never have to think again. Unfortunately, that's not how it works.
Right.
Thank you for naming that, because I think, a lot of the conversation around meaning and impact has to also nod to the privilege that we have or don't have, depending on our lived experience, our identity. We're all on this call because we have pursued higher education. Some of the communities that we serve may or may not have access to those resources, right? But absolutely. That. Okay, we have about, I think 3 to 5 minutes. So maybe time for 2 questions before I hand it over to the SPS team.
Can I answer the one that's in the chat? I just saw that pop up from Latai. Did I say that right?
I'm gonna read it, Imana, just to make sure it's on the recording. The question Lataya dropped was, how do you find the balance in proving yourself without coming off as aggressive?
And that is such a great question, because you can't be the angry Black woman, right? You're just professional. You have to, when you're looking for certain jobs, when you're trying to get in the C-suite, you have to know your stuff more than anybody else. All the details about the job. Be professional. Know how your skill set aligns with what they're looking for. It's not aggressive, it's competence. And you're allowed to be competent. And that is something that you should never shy away from. And if you feel like you have to dim your shine, that's not your job. That's not the place you need to work, because someone should value all the work that you are doing and the qualities that you bring. And if you feel diminished in any way, walk away. That is not the place for you.
Thank you. Adam, I think I saw your hands.
Yeah. I wonder if either of you want to point to, you both talked about crooked pathways. Was there a particular point in that crooked pathway where you kind of just said to yourself, this is it? Like maybe a moment, maybe a interaction, but something that stands out to you as, all right, I think I found it.
Yeah, mine was crystal clear. I think I may have mentioned this, but I just touched on it. I read that book, Earth and Mind, that I put in the chat earlier. I read that book when I finished that book, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to educate people about the environment and the challenges that we faced. And I remember even telling my dad, we were in the car, I can picture it back in Iowa, telling my dad, I figured it out. I know what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing. And I had a confidence that I'd never had before. But, I was, what was I? I don't know, 24, 25, already had been to college. So I was still young, but it was a lot. It was just clear for me. Yeah, it was reading that book.
Yeah, I think the moment I was in a classroom with kids, like, yep, this is my destiny. This is where I'm supposed to be. Kids are the best part of my job. Could do that all day. Kindergarten is my favorite, but don't tell the rest of them that. But I will go into kindergarten just for that. These are the babies.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for sharing time with us on this hour from the airport, Imana. You are a real trooper for that. Shannon, after 2 work days in one, joining us after a 3 a.m. wake up. This has been such a rich conversation. I'm going to hand it over to John Jones, Executive Director for Academic Programs, to close us out.
Can I just say one thing real quick?
Yes, please.
This has been really hard for me to just talk at you guys. I really hate the fact you're on mute. Like, I want to have conversations with all of you and know who you are and what you're doing. And this just feels really unfair that you have to listen to me and I don't get to learn anything about you. So I just wanted to put that out there that I'm really struggling to just be talking at you. I don't like to do that.
Well, Shannon, I think that is a really great plug for our 2026 series because we can make them more interactive. I love that you're saying that. Thank you.
I just know everyone on this call is incredibly interesting in their own way, just as interesting as either of us, but I don't get to learn about them. So yeah, anything you can do to make it more interactive, I would appreciate.
Yes, same.
Excellent. Well, go ahead, L'Oreal.
I was just going to say, I think Tashana raised her hand and had a quick question, so I want to make sure we make time for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Tashana, if you're able, I see in the chat, she says it was by mistake.
All right, John,
okay.
Go ahead.
No worries. Well, can you all join me in thanking our panelists, Imana and Shannon, such great advice and insights that they've shared from their own journeys, and also to Tiffany for being our wonderful moderator for today's conversation. I would encourage you to stay on the lookout, and yes, check your email. As Tiffany mentioned, we will have information about upcoming events, and you see the QR code on the slide on the screen. You can scan that to provide your feedback. There's also a link in the chat, so if you want to use that as well, please share your thoughts about at SPSConnect, if this is your first event or if you've attended multiple events over the course of 2025. We really want to capture those insights to be able to plan for how we can better serve you in 2026 and beyond. And so with that, I want to thank all panelists and attendees for joining today's conversation. And I hope everyone has a great and productive rest of your day. Shannon, please get some rest. We will see you all soon.
All right.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.